Fire and brimstone coming down from the skies. Rivers and seas boiling.
40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes.
The dead rising from the grave.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Enough, I get the point.
I think in like 50 years, the advent of social media is going to be dissected and studied over, and the adverse effects that it's had just on communication, personal relationships, the way societies interact and function. I think it's going to be fascinating for people not living like in this moment with the hindsight of 2020, being able to look back at it, being like, how did it get here? How did things get so bad? I don't know. It feels like it's getting worse and worse by the day. We talk about social media here on the channel. We don't always talk about certain aspects of it, but I do not live in America. Obviously, I am an American. I lived in America. I served in the U.S. military for a little over 20 years. I'm retired Air Force, for those of you who weren't unaware of that. And one of the big things that's protected under the U.S. Constitution is like freedom of expression. You're allowed to have opinions that kind of go against the government. The government cannot oppose their will, as far as your ability to express. You're allowed to go out and say things that go against maybe the line from the government. You can kind of say what you want to a degree. Obviously, there's not true freedom of expression anywhere. There's always going to be that one circumstance where you've gone too far in certain aspects. But for the most part, you're supposed to be allowed to go out and disagree. We're supposed to, as far as civilly disagree, we're supposed to, have conversations. And if we know that we're just oil and water on certain subjects, most people, at least in the past, have been friendly enough to kind of avoid those things. What was it always the saying? Don't talk politics, religion, and money. And you should be okay. But it certainly has grown exponentially on the things that you're not allowed to talk about. You can't say that you don't like certain movies if they represent to certain groups things. Like you can't say that you don't like the Star Wars sequel trilogy. That's bad thing. You're not allowed to have bad thing. You're not allowed to express that maybe you didn't enjoy the latest season of Doctor Who. Because that's bad thing. Because it doesn't matter if you're talking about the production quality, or maybe you thought the acting was subpar, or maybe the writing just wasn't up to standard for the Doctor Who series, which has been around for so long. It will be taken that you are specifically talking about the Doctor Who now is a woman, and that your criticism is only defined by that. Even if you speak for yourself and you clearly define what your criticisms are, no one will accept that. Well, not no one. Large groups of people will not accept that, and they will rain hellfire and brimstone down on your digital ass and try and take you out. When I say take you out, it's not like people aren't trying to get each other removed from social media, or maybe get each other in Twitter timeouts and stuff like that. People are trying to get each other fired. People are trying to get kids removed from their parents over disagreements. And I think it's absolute insanity that we've actually gotten this far. And certainly social media has led to the advent or the rise of cancel culture. Certainly we've had cancel culture for quite some time. I remember during the 80s, all kinds of boycotts were organized by churches. If you're old enough, you remember The Last Temptation of Jesus Christ, controversial film. Churches did not want it released because it went against the canonical teachings of the Bible regarding the Jesus Christ life, and that was a big deal. I remember I was so embarrassed. I'm still a Christian to this day, but this part embarrassed me. A friend of mine that lived down the street when I was a kid, he said, "Hey Wes, I'm interested in maybe going to church. Can I go with you to your next youth services, which were always on Wednesday night?" I said, "Yeah, Brian, why don't you come with me?" And my grandpa comes, he picks us up in his grocery getter, which was a paneled station wagon. We go to church, and I did not realize it was bonfire night, and it was time to burn some albums. So I'm sitting there with my buddy, and he's looking at me as they're like burning Metallica CDs or probably albums as well. And I was never been more embarrassed in my life, like to be a Christian. Jeez. I'm sorry, man. I didn't know this was going to happen. If I would have known, I would have told you no, and you could have come the next week when we're just playing music and having a nice time and learning some lessons. So certainly it's not like censorship or people getting into groups and organizing these things. It's not new phenomenon, but the power that they wield seems to be getting unprecedented and larger by the week and by the month. Me personally, I'm against all forms of cancel culture. I wasn't happy when James Gunn lost his job. I don't think that Aubrey Sitterson should have lost his G.I. Joe job over his abhorrent 9/11 comments. Now, if the sales dropped off because the fan base was mad at him and decided not to buy his comics anymore, that's something else. That's job performance. If you make all your fans mad and they stop purchasing your products, well, then it's time to move on. You kind of ruined your reputation. But just calling on a company to fire somebody, I'm not a big fan of. It's not my deal. Now, there are exceptions. Once you start seeing behavior that goes beyond maybe divisive points of view, bold statements that have pissed a lot of people off. Once you start getting into maybe unethical behavior, maybe illegal behavior, stuff like that, then we can start discussing things. Then while I'm not for an organized boycott, I say, hey, maybe, you got to do what you got to do. But it feels like you can't say anything anymore. You can say the most benign statement, but if it's about a hot, trendy topic or something where the emotions have been dialed up to 13, that's it. It doesn't matter what you say. One side or the other are going to be able to dissect it. They're going to be able to transform it, present it in the way that they wanted to interpret it, whether or not that has anything to do with the way that you presented it. And they will try and burn your ass. And far too often lately, corporations have really taken up the mantle of the right to censor in America and around the world, specifically technology corporations. But now we're seeing entertainment corporations as well. Is this healthy? It doesn't feel healthy. I don't like and there's not just like one side that's right or wrong on this one. Both sides do the same thing. Now, does one side seem to get a more positive result more than the other? Absolutely. But they both cheer themselves on whenever they get a scalp. Nothing's more excited than when you take somebody down and Disney decides in your favor or Twitter decided that you were right this time. But of course, then the next time when they go against you, then we got to get off of Twitter. We got to ban this. We got to ban that. It's like, I don't know. It feels dangerous that entertainment companies and technology companies have decided that they're going to be the arbitrators of free speech and what is appropriate and inappropriate. And it doesn't matter what their terms of service are. Like here on YouTube, when I started my channel and I make my content, it is under terms of service. And I do the best that I can to play within the framework and the rules that I have been given, that this is what the kind of content you can make. It needs to be, we want them to be this long. We want you to do this and this and this. And you can't go outside of this box. I try to stay inside the box as much as I can, as far as my understanding of the rules. Now, I've never been in trouble, but I have had my wrist slapped a couple of times. And I've gone back to YouTube. I'm like, hey, what exactly do you mean here? Because you're saying that I offended this group. Specifically, there's nothing offensive in there. In fact, you could, from my point of view, I'm defending that group. Now, whether somebody could take offense, you can take offense with anything. And the response was crickets. Absolutely nothing. They never explain anything, and it never makes much sense. Same thing goes with Twitter. When you sign up for Twitter, there are terms of service. You are allowed to participate in the online community of Twitter as long as you play by the rules. I see so many people breaking the rules and nothing happens to them. And I see other people perhaps straddling the lines of the rules. Sometimes something happens, sometimes something doesn't. But there are plenty of instances when people do absolutely nothing and they are still slapped down and taken to task for playing within the sandbox that Twitter created. This is the framework of the rules that you made. Facebook, you made these rules. I'm playing by your rules, but you don't like that I'm not stupid and that I can still talk about something you don't want me to talk about without being offensive, and you take offense to it anyway. I think it's very dangerous. I think it's exceptionally dangerous that there's almost no oversight. I'm not a big fan of government and government oversight, but I do think there are critical things that they need to be monitored. They need to make sure that the little man has a fair shake in business dealings and has a fair go of it. And I think at this point, they need to making sure that the little guy has a fair say in an open form of communication like Twitter and Facebook and all these things now, even though there are terms of service. And I think they need to be ensuring that the companies are enforcing their terms of service equally, or just in general, because it doesn't feel like that's happening. And it's really dangerous to go against the hive, not buying into the groupthink, having bad think. I mean, there's almost no greater crime. You could beat somebody with an inch of your life and people will forgive you, but have an opinion. Have an opinion. Maybe have an opinion 5 years ago, which in the moment was quite benign. But over the course of time, the views on what you were speaking of five years ago have changed. People will go back and hold you to task, even though in that very moment, what you said was completely inoffensive. There is no forgiveness. Is this the breakdown of society? I don't know. We don't know what lies in the future, but it feels like it. It feels like we're having a massive breakdown in society. I imagine Gina Carano knew that she had the spotlight on her, probably knew that Disney was keeping an eye on her social media feeds and what she was and wasn't allowed to talk about. And they were just waiting for an offense. Boom, you're gone. You know what I think probably is even worse than her tweets and the content, or the people that she interacted with. You're not allowed to interact with wrong thinkers. You're not allowed to have people that we don't appreciate liking your tweets. If they like your tweets, you should block them. Like, you need to be behaving the way that we want to. And it feels like the corporate structures, these big technology companies, are coming down like that, enforcing their own version of censorship. And they're bringing everyone to heel under groupthink, or at least group speak. You can think what you want, but you can't say it. And that kind of leads into a comic book that I've been reading. I've been promoting it heavily, at least in social media. I've promoted it a time or two here on the channel. It's called Erratic from Kari Andrews. A fantastic comic book. And I'm shocked at the stones of this dude to go out here and talk about these things the way that he is, because he's going to get himself in a lot of trouble. Wrong thinkers are going to appreciate this content, and even me talking about it probably is not doing him any favors. But I do want to applaud the testicular fortitude of the creative team behind Erratic and just the AWA Studios for putting this kind of content out there. And if you do know, Axel Alonso was the EIC over at Marvel Comics, is now like the head honcho at AWA. It's his baby. He created it. There was a time when a lot of outside organizations were coming down on Marvel, and they were bashing them all the time about initiatives that they would like them to embrace and move forward with in Marvel Comics. That Axel Alonso would have none of it. He would always take them to task, and he was adamantly opposed to anyone coming in and enforcing their will on his company. Now that absolutely changed. His tone changed over time. I imagine it had to do with being within the corporate structure of Disney, and maybe not his own personal thoughts, because as we're seeing later on, that might not be exactly how he believed, because he approved this. This is being put out. Look at this interaction between this teacher and this young student in Erratic. Now, this young lady is not Erratic himself. Erratic is the hero. He's like a Spider-Man type of hero, but this is his love interest, sort of. They're flirting now. We don't know where they're going to go. They haven't got there yet, but she is a major supporting character in the series. And this is what she says to the teacher. Sorry, I didn't mean any sort of bad thing. I'm just worried about someone that maybe he's in trouble. And the teacher says, bad thing. And the student responds, you know, the things you're not allowed to say out loud. And the teacher says, are you sure that's a term you want to be using? What it might say about yourself? It seems a little out of character for such a compliant young woman to use a word like bad thing. Would you prefer another word that means the same thing? And she says, nonsense. You can think whatever crazy thoughts your young mind might be experimenting with. Just keep them inside your head where they're safe. But on the outside, you must conform to the group. Now stand up and show you're a good person. And that's what it's all about. It's all about conformity. It's all about bringing you to heel, letting you know that your power to have opinions on anything that could be deemed offensive to anyone else in the world has been nullified. You aren't allowed to have those ideas. You're not allowed to express those ideas. If you have those ideas, you keep them locked deep inside of yourself. You keep them to yourself. You know, you almost need like a safe room where you can bring in other people that maybe want to have free and open discussion. You have to do it in there, because even if you had this conversation with someone that was willing to have it with you, if somebody else heard it and were offended by it, you yourself are you are the offender, even though you weren't communicating with them. That conversation was an A/B conversation. They should see themselves out of there, but they decided to get involved, and because they were offended. And that's just the kind of way it works. Now, it's not just with the corporate structure and technology and stuff. Obviously, I was in the military. And at the end of my tenure, when I was in the military, we were getting updated training on sexual harassment. Now, sexual harassment is unwanted sexual behavior that's offensive, humiliating, or intimidating. Well, guess what could be included in sexual harassment? Flirting. So if I were to be, in the workplace, obviously I was engaged at the time or married once I got the new rules. But if I weren't, and I were to be flirting with somebody else, and they were receptive to it, and it wasn't unwanted. They wanted the flirting, but it was in the office space, and it offended someone else, and they felt it was unwanted or unwarranted. Then I, myself or whoever that person was could be brought up on sexual harassment like charges. It is the damnedest thing where our society has gone. And I do think the advent of social media and the fact that everybody is so goddamn sensitive to everything, it's absolutely insane. And I know there's going to be views on, Wes, but you're so sensitive. Like, you talk about comic books and you get upset. I'm talking about the merits of the work. I don't care what Tom King says unless it's about comics. You'll hear other guests on the channel that might bring up other things. You won't really see me jumping in on that because it's none of my fucking business. I don't care. I don't care what Brian Michael Bendis believes until he starts incorporating those things into the characters and starts changing things. And I don't think change is necessarily bad, but when it goes against the long-standing history and like the essence of who that character is, then it's time to talk about those things. But as far as what Bendis's politics are or whatever his thoughts on things that I disagree with, I don't really care. It's none of my business. It really is. But you don't like Teenie Howard's writing on Excalibur? Yeah, because it sucks. She's so interested in magic that she's not telling stories about fantastic mutant superheroes anymore. I don't care about anything else. I know that she's a witch. We did talk about that on the channel because there's a bunch of magic and shit in the Ten of Swords story arc. She is incorporating that part of her life into it. I don't care that she's a witch. Go do whatever you want. None of my business. None of that stuff's my business. I think most people will be exceptionally surprised about the diversity among the panelists that come here on the channel. We don't get into all that stuff. I'll tell you right now, it doesn't lean one way or the other. We got some people pretty far out on the left, in my opinion. Some people pretty far out on the right, in my opinion. We got a lot more people more closely aligned with the center, which is kind of where I am. Does it bother you? Does it offend you that I'm a conservative leaning independent? Is that offensive to you? Is it okay with you for me to have my own point of view on politics and other things? Or is that a reason to shut me down? Am I not allowed to try and sell my wares or entertain people because you don't agree with, because we have a difference of opinion over politics and maybe some other things? Is my family no longer important? Am I not allowed to support my family? Am I no longer allowed to go out there and try to earn money and have a home? How about, is it okay if I have a car? Does it bother you if I have a mode of transportation because we disagree on something as silly as politics? I hate to break it to you. I hate to break it to all of you. Politics, pretty much all over the world, is a dirty green. There aren't a lot of good people in it. If your faith is fully placed in politicians as if they're going to save anything for you, I don't think you understand what's been happening for the last, 100 years around the world. I'm a skeptic and I am cynical. I still have a family. And I'm still allowed to have an opinion. Sort of. Do I get to freely express my opinions? No. Nobody does. If I play within the rules, am I going to be okay? No. Nobody is. And that's the crazy part. There's no stopping all this stuff. It's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. Once they've gotten this group of wrong thinkers done on this side and maybe a sliver of wrong thinkers done on the other side, guess what happens? It's time to find some more wrong thinkers. It's time to expand the program, people. We need to get more people in compliance. We need to bring more people to heal, and that's basically kind of where we're at. And I think it's sad. It's, not just sad for America. It's sad for the world. I don't know that it's quite the way it used to be, but people look to America for leadership and guidance on things. Maybe not so much anymore, but still, watch where America goes is where the world goes. And freedom of expression is being wiped out. Now it's obviously being wiped out quicker in other places, but the fact that America is accepting it and they're allowing technological companies to implement this type of censorship and basically unpersoning people and allowing for reprisals and other forms of like essentially punishment for having opinions or expressing those opinions. It's not having the opinions, it's expressing the opinions, is how we got here. And there's no turning back now. We're too far down the road. Now there will be, eventually everything rights itself. But we've got to continue down until we're at the end of the track before it can all be righted. That's why I think in 50 years people will be looking at this and with utter amazement at how we got ourselves here, how stupid we were for any of us to just allow it, and how they'll never allow it to happen again. That's what you hope is in the future people learn from our mistakes, because we're making a lot of them right now. In my opinion, I understand if you disagree with me, and that's okay. We can disagree, or can we disagree? That's the question, because it feels like disagreement and not buying into groupthink is essentially the scarlet letter these days. And I don't see that changing.